You're listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast, brought to you by DraftKings, America's #1 sportsbook app. With the great John Schuster, I am merely Mike Luke. We have got a lot to get to today. Again, hopping on right now. Arizona with a school record for points, 117-75. Schu, watching this game up close, one thing I'm going to tell you, and you said this from day one, there's a lot of good stuff to get to, but the first thing that you notice about this team is, and you talked about this early on, the spacing, the passing, how every angle is utilized by this squad is absolutely outstanding. And you saw that on full display in this game.
I think it's a season record, by the way, of points in an opener for Arizona.
Oh, is that okay?
So the 117 performance, obviously very good for Arizona. Cats got off to a quick start. I think at one point had 14 assists to their first 17 baskets. If Arizona's doing that offensively, things are progressing pretty well. And spacing is something that they seem to understand and pick up fairly quickly, which is nice to see in a Tommy Lloyd style offense. Beyond that, and I think one of the things that's going to be an issue when they get up against better competition is how good are teams against them in matching Arizona's bigs' ability to get down the floor in the fast break. Because I think Arizona's going to do pretty good on the glass. With the size of this team, they should. And if Arizona can do that and they still have a bigger two who can run the floor pretty well, then, they're going to be able to score in transition quite a bit and put pressure on the opposition. It's the ball movement. It's their size. It's their willingness to be unselfish. Spacing, as you talked about, and also their ability to score willingly in transition. That gives Arizona, makes Arizona a problem, at least on the offensive end. And so far in 2 games against inferior competition, they've played pretty well on the defensive end as well to make a lot of that happen. Were there too many turnovers tonight? Yeah, but this is a game. But this is a game that was never in doubt, and Arizona had a lot of in addition to 117, which is filling the stat sheet from a team standpoint, there were a lot of individuals who had stat filler nights too.
Yes, all right. So let's talk about the big men up front, as you affectionately call them, the 4 peaks. Azuolas, Tubelis, all eyes were on him. I felt pretty much all off season, that I think he needs to be the best player on this team. I don't necessarily need him to be the crunch time guy, but every game I need him to be able to get 18 and 8, something like that. And I think you saw a decisive, and I thought you saw a good finishing Tubelis. Again, this was a small team in Nicholls, not Nicholls State that Arizona was going against. But I liked what I saw from Schu, and I liked what I saw from him early. It looked like they made a concerted effort to get him the ball and get him the ball quickly.
There are 3 guys on this roster from last year, Mike, that I think fall under that category of individuals who took the offseason to get into a different kind of shape that allows them to be a little bit more athletic and a little bit more cohesive in regards to understanding what it is they want to accomplish and then being able to get it done. In addition to Tubelis, Larsson does a lot of that, and I think Ballo is another guy who seems to be reasonably effective so far in that regard as well, and perhaps coincidentally, but we'll see how it plays out as the season moves along. You've got 3 guys tonight who had excellent individual performances, en route to Arizona, having all kinds of success on the offensive end.
Yeah, and Pelle Larsson's another guy too. You can tell, that he's just, again, he's kind of you can tell why Tommy Lloyd likes him. He's a pretty good shooter. He's a pretty good finisher. He doesn't do a lot of dumb things out there. Again, I don't know exactly what my statistical expectations are for him, but Pelle Larsson looks like a Gonzaga-type basketball player. Not an elite level Gonzaga-type basketball player, but a guy that is always in the rotation right there.
Up in the East Valley, they have a place called IKEA. The place called IKEA has Swedish meatballs. Down in Tucson, we have a Swedish pinball. This guy never fails to be on the ground, get contact, just, bouncing all over the place. And yet he always seems to, more often than not, he seems to figure out he's a frustration for the opposition. And
he's an irritant
that are constantly mystifying. He gets done what he wants to get done on a pretty consistent basis. It would not surprise me. And he had one of those games tonight. It would not surprise me if Larsson is a 15, 7, and 5 assist guy. Right. That is a line that I don't think is out of the realm of possibility whatsoever. He's, and he's maybe the one guy on this roster who you feel pretty good about defensively against better opposition. Now, other guys may show to be very good defenders as well and change that dynamic a little bit. But in the early stages, it looks like Larsson is a little ahead of that game. And I think to a large degree, we're going to have this conversation a lot, Mike, where he isn't really noticeable, but then you look back and you're kind of perplexed that he had the line that he did.
I got to talk to Jacob Franklin real quick because I also had to talk to some other people about this. I know that Google says that it's Nicholls State. They have changed their name to Nicholls. They made a big deal about that in the media guide, in the presser this week. I think it sounds dumb, but it is Nicholls, believe it or not.
Well, they'd be better off if they learned how to stop on a dime.
Terrible. Well, there you go, Jacob. All right, Scott Schlittenhart, the great Scott Schlittenhart said, is this team a better shooting team versus last year's team? It's an interesting question because you look at last year, Ben Mathurin was kind of your jack of all trades guy, could score at all three levels. But you look at this year's team, especially with the spacing. We got Adama Bal, who we're going to get to. Kerr Kriisa looked very comfortable shooting out there. Pelle Larsson as well. Cedric Henderson also was a guy who, I like Cedric Henderson a great deal, and we're going to talk about him going forward. But with the spacing, it wouldn't surprise me if this team shot a better percentage from three. It really wouldn't, Schu.
I don't know.
That's a skeptical response from John.
Yeah, I think there's a chance they may be a better shooting team only because they get so many cheapies at the rim, which is great. I think Arizona, like last year, is going to be among the nation's leaders in getting 2-point baskets. That's fantastic. They're going to score very well to get good looks because of the way they move the ball, and they're unselfish. That's great. Are they a good shooting team? I'm not convinced that's the case whatsoever. And I think once they're challenged from 3-point range, we're going to find out just how inconsistent they are. I'm not sure that that's a part of the game that I expect them to be. They're going to have to be an extra pass or an extra second to pass open 3-point style of unit where they do a lot of damage on the inside because they're so big and force teams to collapse on them and then be able to hit relatively open, relatively uncontested threes. Overall, from beyond the arc, I really don't expect them to be that good. But with the lineup that they have, I hope that they're good enough to keep teams honest, which would help to open up the inside. I suspect in the not too distant future, and it's kind of ironic or coincidental here, the former coach of Arizona, who's now at Xavier, has a defensive style that I could see Arizona seeing a lot this year. They're going to get packed inside quite a bit to try to double down on some of these big guys to make it a little bit more difficult because in one-on-one matchups across the board, that's going to be a problem. So Arizona's going to have to be able to, again, keep teams honest from the perimeter. And at this stage, I'm not convinced how well they're going to be able to do that, but I hope that Scott's onto something and that Arizona proves me wrong.
All right, Ben Blicklin. Great name, Ben. We appreciate you hopping in here, my guy. He said, let's go Cats. Beautiful team wins. All of the guys looking like they're ready to take the next step. Tommy Lloyd is showing why he's the best coach. He will get us there. Bear down, baby. Back the A, as some people might say. Either way, it works. You know what's really, I think is really impressive about this, and we got a whole bunch of comments we're going to get to. Tommy Lloyd, I think, has a lot of people look at stars and recruiting and, bringing in all these people. There's a little bit of loot in Tommy Lloyd, and that I think we might be overlooking the fact of internal improvement, because a lot of times when guys got here under Sean Miller, they were kind of the same dude. Now, there were guys that improved, but they were kind of the same guy when they left. I think you're going to see guys, and I think you're going to see internal improvement be a massive part of what Tommy Lloyd wants to do.
That's an excellent point. And if Arizona if the program is good at doing that sort of thing, then Arizona's going to be a little bit ahead of the game. I think they're always going to be, they're consistently going to be undervalued from a recruiting standpoint, only because Lloyd is so entrenched on what's happening globally. Mm-hmm. But, if an extra year in the program is something that works very well for them, then yeah, I think you can see some good improvement from year to year from some players who you hope are able to do that. We're in year 2. We're going to find out. Is Ball up to the challenge? Is Larsson significantly better? How much better is Tubelis coming into the year this year? How much better is Ballo coming in? We're going to have some anecdotal evidence here. And it gives us an opportunity, looking at the potential of some of the other players, of what we may be seeing in the offing. But obviously, so far, so good.
All right, a couple things. Got to tell you about OGs. All right, here's the deal. OGs has agreed to a new deal with PHNX. Terms of the agreement weren't released at the time, but sources close to the two sides say we're immensely excited and looking forward to creating more great content with the brands. As always, you can find them at your local dispensary. Must be 21 and up to enjoy. I'm going to be up in Phoenix, and supposedly there might be giving me some OGs up there. OGs obviously is one of the best gummy brands out there. Again, 21 and up. Great things going on there. Super happy that they've hopped on there as well. So again, OGs, again, very happy to have them as part of the PHNX family. And the Four Peaks. Four Peaks Brewery, the official brew of PHNX Sports. Now, you might say, where can I find Four Peaks? I live in Tucson. Great question. You can go to the Tap and Bottle watch parties for the away games downtown, and that's where you will find Four Peaks. Like I said, all kinds of great stuff with Four Peaks. You go down, they got the Tempe location as well. You can go in there. They got they got great deals. You can leave there with all kinds of good stuff. And on top of that, you got watch parties there as well. Or check it out, Four Peaks Brewery. Again, 21 and up, Arizona, or 21 and up. Enjoy responsibly. See show notes for more details. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about Adama Bal here. I talked with Ryan Hansen a little bit about this, and we're going to get to Robbie's comment in a second, because I think it's a very good point. But I was curious what kind of jump he was going to make. Was he going to be a 4-point per game guy? Was he going to be an 11-point per game guy? And to me, it was always kind of, can he make that Michael Dickerson type jump? Now, again, I'm not saying that he's Michael Dickerson, but Dickerson went as a freshman from averaging 4 points per game to about 11. And then after that, 18, 19. Ball looks like a guy that's probably going to flirt with 9, 10 points per game here, John Schuster.
He's going to, and I think in critical games against better competition, having him with the ability to do that really helps Arizona open things up and makes it a lot more difficult on the opposition. Ball might be the most important, in my opinion, player on this team this year. And I think there's a lot in that skill set. He is like a lot of these. One of the things that Arizona does really well, the way that they move the ball and their unselfish play, Ball sees the floor, I think, exceptionally well for someone his age. Right. And finding the open guy, I think, is something that he can do on a fairly consistent basis. And if he can tap into the talent potential that I think he has, that position could really be bolstered by Arizona. And I think it's one of Arizona's real question marks coming into this year. They've got such size on the inside.
Correct.
I think they're solid in the backcourt. I really don't know how they are at the wing position. I think they're okay. I don't know if they're elite. But if Ball makes a leap, I think Arizona can be a lot more well-rounded as a team. And obviously, that's something that's good news. And if that's the case, I think Arizona can be a real problem.
Did the turnovers worry you at all? Robbie, thanks. obviously a big fan of Robbie. She made the point, turnovers were a little bit of a bugaboo last year for Arizona. Is this kind of first game jitters? You worry about that a little bit? Is this something they're going to work out? What do you think?
Why don't you get back to us in about 6 weeks on that one?
For sure. Fair question.
If you're, and it's not, the concern is legitimate, but they were up 30. And so when you're up 30, you're not necessarily surprised that they were a little bit sloppy from time to time. And one of the things, and this is kind of interesting, I was listening to one of the local radio broadcasts with our pal Steve Rivera. Last week, he was talking to Brian Peabody, who's the head coach over at Pima. And Peabody has changed his style pretty significantly. It looks a great deal more. They're not exactly parallel, but it's much more up and down. It's much more quick possessions. It's much more kind of in the general Lloyd approach. And one of the things that he mentioned as a result of that is that you kind of have to take the good with the bad. And sometimes you're going to force more turnovers because you have more possessions. And I think, or you're going to commit more turnovers because you have more possessions. And Arizona's up-tempo style is probably going to lead to that. Generally speaking, a relative rule of thumb is 14 or less turnovers. If Arizona has that number, I think you're going to like the way that they play.
You're going to win a lot of games this year.
Arizona's probably going to win a lot of games if they commit 18 to 20 turnovers too. Now, is that something that's going to happen in the NCAA tournament? You'd better as hell not be doing that. And you definitely want to get those numbers down in that regard. I expect better teams to press Arizona to see how effective they can be. Nicholls doesn't have the athleticism or the size to make that work, but it was nice that they gave that an effort. Arizona's going to have to see how good are they against legit physicality. I don't know.
Right.
There are a heck of a lot of questions out there. Right now, they're dominating the inside. A team that size can do it, but when they get bumped around a little bit or somebody can challenge them, and there are a lot of challenging teams on the roster. I'm looking forward to those games to see how Arizona responds. And if Arizona can't get into any rhythm at all and is throwing the ball all over the court, then yeah, that could be a problem.
All right. Aaron, my middle name, by the way, says, I know Boswell is young, but damn, he's going to be good. You can tell he is finding his place and doesn't want to go full ham just yet. I can't wait till he gets comfortable. I agree with this. To be honest with you, Kylan Boswell, just so everybody knows, should be a senior in high school this year. He's coming off a foot injury, which I think a lot of people didn't even think he was going to be able to play until the next, calendar year. You can tell again, he turned the ball over quite a few times, but you can also tell too that Tommy Lloyd's probably got big plans for him in the future.
Yeah, it appears that way, and in the last 30 seconds ago, we were just talking about Arizona's physicality. He looks like one of those guys who could fit that role a little bit. And I'm also looking forward to the transfer suspension when Ramey gets back on the floor here in a couple games. That's going to be nice. I think that's going to be something that Arizona can benefit from as well. So you've had a little bit more of an opportunity to see him, but it looks so far like he's somebody who can step up and hit some big shots for Arizona, which is good because the Cats are going to have 2 or 3 guys on this roster with the potential to score 15 a game.
Right.
And then if you can go to a 4th option or a 5th option and that guy's fairly consistent, then that puts a lot of pressure on opposing defenses. And that's the kind of balance Arizona wants.
And look at ASAP Duck 123. Great name, by the way. Team moves the ball so well. It's beautiful. 30 assists on 38 made field goals is outstanding. And you said that from day one, because again, John Schuster has always admired Gonzaga from afar. Just because of the ball movement, the spacing and everything. And you were excited when they hired Tommy Lloyd about this. And so far it's come to fruition. Again, 30 assists on 38 made field goals is as ASAP Duck 123 said, absolutely incredible.
Yeah, what was it, Mike, last year that for a good portion of the year, didn't Arizona lead the country in assists and made field goals?
Yep.
And that, I think this team has a very similar makeup.
Right.
The ball movement's good and they buy into the system. And one of the things that I find fascinating about this system, and fascinating in that more teams don't do it, I think it's relatively easy.
For sure.
And it's either easy or Few and Lloyd are excellent communicators. Because it doesn't necessarily appear that the Cats are lost all that often on the offensive end. It seems that they know how they want to cut, where somebody's going to be. They understand angles. They don't have any problem making an extra pass or two. And to a large degree, they also don't have a problem taking an open shot if it's there. And that's a delicate balance, and it looks like Arizona's able to do it yet again in the early stages. And they may be one of those teams that peaks a little bit earlier than some of the others. And then we'll see how once the opposition gets a general idea on how to try to defend some of those players, maybe Arizona levels off a little bit, but the Cats could be in at rates like this. And again, they've played an exhibition team and a team from a smaller conference that just doesn't have the size and is overwhelmed in that regard. So Arizona did what it was supposed to do. Fortunately, about 2 weeks down the road, we're going to get significantly better competition, and we'll have a little bit better idea, I think, as to what might be in the offing as far as this season is concerned. But I'm also interested, if Arizona's a little bit ahead of the curve right now, are other teams going to be able to catch up in January and February and so forth? And how is Arizona ultimately going to react to that? But obviously, when you put up 117, Mike, it's so far so good.
I want to talk about Cedric Henderson Jr. for a second here. I think he was kind of a overlooked guy in the entire offseason. Again, came here from Campbell. His pops played in the NBA for quite a few years. Played with Penny Hardaway at Memphis. You watch Cedric Henderson, and he's got a unique skill set on this team in that he's about 6'6". He's very strong. You can tell that he's got a lot of position flexibility, especially on the defensive side of the ball or defensive side of the court. And he's been making his threes. And again, as we've talked about quite a bit, he put up 18 and 11 last year on Duke. He put up 18 and 12 against VCU, the two best teams they played. I like him, and I think even when Courtney Ramey comes back, I think he's going to have a set role on this team all season, Schu.
And the set role, in your opinion, is what?
I think he's going to play about 23 to 24 minutes per game. I think he's going to be a physical wing defender that can also play down low. I also think that when they go small, because I think there's going to be times when they go small and they try to go fast, and it's going to be a lineup where you got Kriisa, where you got Ramey, where you got Larsson, where you got Henderson, and you got Tubelis. I think he's going to be in a lot of different lineups right there because of what he's able to do.
Boy, that would be a very interesting. How often do you think Arizona's going to throw that when you've got four big guys on your roster? How often are you going to throw out a lineup that is trying to match teams with quickness, even though Arizona already seems to be getting down the
My guess is that he's going to be too good to keep off the court. Now, I think at some point, if Oumar Ballo forces his way out there, that's obviously a great thing. But I think Henderson's going to be a guy for quite a while. Joshua Monfort says, great point here. Henry Vesar, you will look at him out there, and again, just watching him from back. We're not on press row, media's back, but man, his wingspan looks like Coloco's. Again, he's not Coloco, but he looks like he's got about an 8-foot wingspan out there. Schu.
I think Joshua's right. He looked pretty darn impressive.
He really did.
And in the television broadcast, Don McLean talked about how he isn't particularly filled out at this stage, so he gets bumped around a little bit once he gets on the inside, which is an interesting thing to keep an eye on throughout the course of the year. I will buy into McLean's ability to see that as quickly as he did and understand what it takes to try to get a little bit more forceful in that regard. But in terms of overall skill set, he looks like a guy who can get a lot of minutes and play pretty well. I was reasonably impressed, because a lot of big guys look a little clumsy, a little clunky, trying to figure out. And Joshua talked about this, the footwork scenario. It looks like there's a lot that he's understanding and is a little bit ahead right now. And that's a nice regular minute third inside guy that you can go to that gives Arizona a little bit of versatility. And even if they're up against physical big teams, not that it's the way you ultimately want to go about it, but it's also 4 extra fouls.
All right, Jacob, could we go to buy the numbers right here, and let's see what we got right here, because there's some good stuff here. Sorry, Ricky, your comments going off the right there. You make great points as always. All right, 50 rebounds to 30. That doesn't really surprise me a ton, mainly because Arizona was so much bigger. The 30 assists was very impressive. 61% 3-point shooting, 71% from the field. Again, it could just be a one-off, but this team looked, outside of the turnovers, and I realize I'm kind of speaking out of both sides of my mouth, this team looked pretty crisp offensively, Schu.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, and I think those numbers back it up.
Right.
Yeah, it's sort of difficult to criticize a team that put up 117.
Right.
and
for sure.
And those offensive numbers are illustrating just that. 30 assists, that's a ridiculous number.
Right.
And it's nice. If Arizona could shoot in the neighborhood of 41.1% from 3-point range, I think that they're going to win a lot of games with that formula, as opposed to 61-1. But being able to shoot overall about 72%, and they were at that 72 mark pretty much throughout the game.
Right.
It seemed to be reasonably consistent. There were a couple points where things lagged a little bit, but generally speaking, Arizona was getting pretty much any look it wanted and converting them.
Yes, and the one thing too, and I think David Matola, as always, makes a very good point here. He says, "I'm confident in determining that Vasar is going to be better than Kirk Walters." The one thing about Lute, and again, Lute Olson's one of the top 15 coaches to ever walk a college basketball sideline, so this is nitpicking. But it always felt like he got a project in here, and about 40% of the time it worked. 40% of the time it didn't work. And there was a lot of Kirk Walters. There was a lot of Alex Jacobsons. There was a lot of Kevin Flanagan types that just didn't really look like they belonged out there. But there was also some guys that he brought in that looked different. Your AJ Bramletts of the world, who looked out of place as a freshman and then became one of the better big men in school history, by the time that he was done there. I look at Vasar, I look at Dylan Anderson, and I think these are guys that have a lot more potential than some of the guys we were used to seeing under Lute.
Anderson is the guy who's behind the curve, which is understandable.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing that's going to help him a lot, and Olson, coincidentally, was one of the guys who talked about this on a fairly regular basis, is that when you have good competition in practice, the steps that players make behind the scenes are quicker than the public gets to see.
Right.
And so Anderson, hopefully, and I anticipate that there could be games like this where Arizona's going to have to play the attrition matchup on the inside. And maybe under those situations, Anderson's a guy who really isn't going to get a lot of quality minutes this year, but in a big game somewhere along the line might have to. And if he can hold his own, then that gives Arizona an interior that a lot of other teams at the college level just don't have, and it's helpful. So you're throwing out Ballo, Tubelis, Vasar, and that's good. Right now, that's a pretty good interior lineup. And then if Anderson can get progressively better and just be there when you need him to be there, and you never really know when this is going to be.
They have a Donnell Harris type role.
That's pretty much exactly that. That's probably the best overt comparison for Arizona Wildcat fans you can make. If it's something like that, and you hope Anderson, like some of these other inside guys, makes big leaps and stays in the program for an extended period of time and has the patience to do what I think Arizona believes these guys ultimately can.
All right, Jose, we're going to get to a point guard play in just a second, but a couple things. The tap and bottle watch parties. All right, great showing this past Saturday. Had over 50 people show up. Very happy with everybody out there. And it was a great time. Again, all the away game watch parties, tap and bottle downtown. We're going to have another one this Saturday as Arizona football takes on UCLA. So again, downtown, they got Four Peaks Brew down there as well. Got a food truck, got Mountain Mike's Pizza as well, a new sponsor of the show. But again, come join us downtown, tap and bottle watch party. Scott and Rebecca, some of the coolest people you'll ever come across. And again, great showing. Love to see everybody out there again. I'd also like to tell you real quick, do you know any procrastinators, John Schuster?
Not a single one, Mike Luke.
Have you ever procrastinated on trying to figure out a procrastinator?
That's the biggest procrastination that anyone could possibly procrastinate.
Well, you know what? If you're a procrastinator, check out Game Time, because we're all sports fans out here, and there's a lot of people that, for whatever reason, they don't really like, finding their tickets early on. Game Time is there for you. They know the procrastinators out there. Not only that, they want to be able to help you save some money. You can get up to 60% when you get your tickets last second through Game Time. Again, check it out. Check it out. Game Time. Absolutely where it's at. Check the show notes and the link in the description. You can help PHNX out by getting your tickets through the link in the description. Game Time is where it's at. Link right there. Appreciate you right there as always, Mr. Jacob Franklin, the tallest, coolest guy in the world. Men's basketball tickets are there as well, so check it out. Game Time, and the link in the description as well. All right, Jose Roman, and then Mike Zaniga. Great point here as well. Jose Roman says, if you touched on point guard play, I thought Kerr Kriisa looked good. What I want to see from him, first of all, I thought he looked more confident without the headband. He's got it. And again, to me, with Kerr Kriisa, it's fairly simple. I need him to be able to shoot about 40% from three, 40% from the field, and we're good. I just can't have you in the low 30s for both of them. I thought he looked good there. And again, I think Kylan Boswell is a player that's going to be getting a lot of play at that point guard position. I was fine with everything I saw from them. I know Boswell turned the ball over, but I'm going to grade that on a different curve, mainly because he hasn't played a ton, and he should be a senior in high school.
The balancing game that I think Kriisa is going to have as the season moves along, because he's a crowd favorite, is recognizing and being okay with maybe being the number 5 scorer on this roster.
Right.
And instead of being the guy who a lot of people maybe in the offseason anticipated, well, they're going to need Kriisa to step up. And instead of, in these broadcasts already, you've been talking about Larsson and talking about Tubelis and talking about some of the other guys as possible people who can fill those roles. Haven't brought up Kriisa, have you? Yet.
Which in a weird way is maybe a good thing, because a lot of times when we're leading with him, it'd be from an 0 to 11 or experience or something.
And I think you're right. And it's not that he isn't capable of doing that. And I think you're right. He obviously needs to shoot at a better percentage. But if he's comfortable in the role of Arizona winning, more than he is comfortable in being the flamboyant guy who thinks he needs to hit big shots throughout the course of the game and maybe even lead the team in scoring, then I think Arizona's a little bit better off. If he is wise about the shot selection that he takes, and it's a fine balancing act.
Right.
And if he can keep the ego in check a little bit, I think Arizona fans are going to be just fine with his performance. And if he's good with Arizona winning basketball games, they're maybe going to win a lot more if he's shooting 7 times a game as opposed to 15.
Yeah, for sure. I think Mike Zaniga makes a point that I had somebody at the game ask me about. Is it possible this team plays better as a team than last year? In a weird way, not having an A-plus talented player makes them play as a unit. To me, it's an interesting question, because I don't believe this year's team, and again, I would love to be wrong. Again, I've been wrong many times in the past. I will continue to be wrong. But I don't know that when you lose a guy, Ben Mathurin was one of the 5-6 best players in college basketball last year, and he proved it time and time and time again on the biggest stage. Christian Koloko was one of the handful of best defensive players. Arizona, I think, as a team can make up for some of that, but you don't lose 2 All-Americans, in my opinion, and replace them, with good pieces without really being the I don't necessarily see the upside for the last year's team, but I could also see them being a better, maybe more well-rounded team. What do you think, Schu?
Yeah, this is the classic both sides of the coin type.
Right.
What you said, I think, is exactly right. There are going to be games this year that Arizona doesn't win where the lead is going to be, oh boy, Arizona needs to find somebody who can hit the big shot at the big time. Golly, they don't have Ben Mathurin on this roster.
Right.
That's going to be a theme, probably recurring at some point this year. Is the comment right? I think so. I think Arizona, out of necessity, is going to be more of a quote-unquote team consistently for the majority of 40 minutes, but there will be times where you wish you had a guy like Mathurin who could take the game over.
Right.
And just and it's not
because he was that dude, and we saw it time and time again.
That's right. And Arizona's going to play some really good basketball teams this year who have good defenders who are going to make it difficult for Arizona to find shots, and the Cats are going to maybe have to manufacture them either by getting it on the inside and hope you hit some free throws, or with putbacks as opposed on the offensive glass. But their ability, because they don't have a standout superstar, I think they're going to be able to look more like a level team. There's going to be there's going to be sort of a plateau component about them, in that you have, instead of one guy who can score 25, you're going to have 4 guys on the roster who can put up 15.
You know what this team reminds me of, Schu? And again, and I've talked about this quite a bit, but this team reminds me a lot of 95, 96, in that the previous year you lost Damon Stoudemire, one of the handful of best players in school history. You lost Rayos, and everybody was like, well, you're going to come back to earth. And then that next year you had Ben Davis, who was about 15 a game. You had Reggie Geary, that was about 9 a game. You had Miles Simon, about 11, 12 a game. Michael Dickerson, about 11, 12 per game. Corey Williams, kind of in that 8 to 9 point range. You could go on and on down, where you had so many guys who were between about 15 to 8. And I don't know that there's anybody quite like Ben Davis on this team, or like Reggie Geary, but I could see kind of that same type of contribution, though.
I think Arizona's going to surprise us in the regular season. My concern is that because they don't have, for lack of a better way to put it, necessarily an alpha who you can just feed the ball to on a regular basis, or is just willing to break somebody down, that maybe that becomes a problem in the tournament. But, we've got 4 months to get there. We might be surprised. A couple of the transfers that you've talked about who seem to have a nasty disposition might be players who can step up and hit some huge shots. Again, from a 3-point standpoint, I think Arizona is going to have some open looks. And those are the types of shots that lend themselves to being crowd momentum type buckets.
Right.
I don't think Arizona has a pure shooter per se, but they've got guys on the roster who can hit relatively open looks if you're just pounding it inside because you have a height advantage. So Arizona has an opportunity to make some of that happen. And then maybe a lot of this fills itself through. But I think the Cats' success this year isn't really going to be on the wing. It's what kind of success do they have on the interior, because that height advantage is hard for a lot of teams to match up against.
And that's something going into the game too, that you can't really, there's no way to really practice against height. It's funny, I'll give you my high school basketball experience, and believe it or not, it wasn't a D1 type experience, but when you would go against teams that you knew were going to be taller, bringing out the broomstick and bringing out, that's just not the same thing. There's no real way to really replicate that. And Arizona comes at you in waves with the 4 peaks. Yeah. Now, again, it's more about I'm sorry, I just have a hard time saying that.
Keep doing it.
I know I am. People think it's dumb. I don't care. It's 4 peaks. Kobe Thiel, if you're out there, this is going to stick. But Azuolas, Tubelis, Ballo, and Vasar, and to a lesser extent Anderson, you're going 6'9" and above every single time, and you've got multiple of those guys out there.
Yeah, and that's going to play a role. That's going to be a big deal, because just in the early stages, it doesn't look like Arizona's really good, but I don't know that they have superstar first team athleticism on the wings or in the backcourt. Right. I think they're good at the wing in the backcourt, but I don't know if they have a standout at that position. It's understandable when you lose a top pick in the NBA draft and another guy in Terry who turned out to be one of the better athletes, I think, not just in the conference, but in the country.
There's a reason he was a top 20 pick.
Correct. And those are obviously, especially in the early stages of what Tommy Lloyd is trying to do, difficult to replace. So Arizona isn't going to have the star power that it has. Doesn't mean they don't have guys on the roster who we're talking like Arizona's going to has a bunch of guys who score 15 and 8. And generally speaking, I think that's probably right. But that doesn't mean Ballo isn't going to score 25 in some game, and Tubelis isn't going to score 25 in some game, and Larsson might hit 30 or something like that on, it isn't going to happen a lot, but it could happen every now and again. That's obviously a very real possibility. But I think generally speaking, so far, what we've seen is that Arizona's strength is on the interior, which means that you get second shot opportunities. You get to the foul line. You put a lot of pressure on the opposition defensively. And then hopefully from inside out, you're able to open some things up on the perimeter, keep teams honest in that regard, and your offense can flow reasonably well.
All right. Also, have I told you about the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX?
I've vaguely heard about it, but one of the things that I've heard a rumor about is if you can bet the over specifically on what Arizona is going to score in the early stages of the season, I'd suggest that maybe that's a good idea.
John Schuster likes to suggest things. I agree with him on that. Jose, we're going to get, that's another great question right there. And Nate, you make a great point as well. We'll get there in just a second. But here's the deal with the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Again, code word PHNX. New customers can bet and $5 on any NBA team money line and get $200 if you win. That simple, that easy. You can also boost your winnings up to 100% with DraftKings stepped up same game parlays. It's simple. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use promo code PHNX. Again, promo code PHNX. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. Again, like Schuster said, if you're like I would like the over on a lot of things. There's a reason they call him the Tommy Gun out there. Tommy Gun's getting up and down the court, and he's running and gunning out there. So again, this isn't ASU basketball. They don't struggle with Tarleton State. You don't have a guy and Frankie Collins that's going 8 of 39 from the field. You don't have to deal with any of that stuff. Arizona basketball is what you want to bet on the under. DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. All right. Nate makes a great point right here. He says, and this is kind of what I was getting to earlier, U of A can go super big and super small and still keep a blistering pace on offense. Defense, that's a tricky bit. But yes, again, you've got a lot of position flexibility with this squad.
How often do you think they're going to go relatively small?
You know, I think there's going to be times when they go small because, well, honestly, I think a lot of it depends on how good Ball or Henderson turn out to be. Now, if Ball turns out to be a guy that is you can't really keep off the court, or if Henderson is that guy as well, I think there's room for both of those guys to probably be getting somewhere between 18 to 24 minutes. I don't really know. I think it's going to be matchup specific. I get what you're saying. And quite frankly, I don't have the answer to that one, Schu.
What kinds of teams would you
UCLA. UCLA is a very small team.
Okay. So you'd go with a smaller lineup against UCLA because UCLA smalls put pressure on Arizona's size and athleticism?
Only if that's a great question. Only if Ballo and or Vasar looked out of place. Like we saw that last year against Houston. We saw that against TCU. Well, yes, they were big, but they were kind of getting it taken to them by guys who were about 6'6", 220, something like that. If that's the case, I think you've got some options right there. But that's kind of where I think it is with that. Jose Roman. And Schuster, I've stolen what you said multiple times about Courtney Ramey, and it's spot on. You're a smarter man than me, and that's why I'm going with this. He said, what impact will Ramey have on what we saw tonight? What will he add? Ramey, you said, and I think you hit the nail on the head, where he said he looks like one of those Houston guards last year that gave Arizona problems. He's tough. He's physical. He can handle. He can shoot a little bit. He can defend. Ramey is a unique player on this team in that there isn't really another guy quite like him.
And I'm hoping that that's right. You've mentioned a couple of the and Ramey falls under this category. One or two of the other transfers that you talked about seem to have that same sort of maybe the nasty streak that an Arizona team could use. Right. And even when it's one of those things when you play a smooth, free-flowing style that doesn't look aesthetically displeasing. So not Sean Miller. What you trade for that is the interpretation that you're not physically tough. And there are a lot of guys on this roster who you can make kind of that proclamation about, at least from an overall concern standpoint. So if you have some attitude in the backcourt and on the wings, and Arizona just might, and Ramey maybe is the leader in that. I think that's a great thing to have. And it gives you an opportunity against teams that are going to have to make things ugly to try to be able to effectively deal with that. And we get to see as the season moves along just how effective Arizona is with a variety of styles that are thrown at them.
All right, everybody. We're going to sign off here. Arizona basketball back Friday, and we got a football game on Saturday. Big thanks to everybody out there. Tons of comments. Everybody that commented. Really, really appreciate you all. Jacob Franklin, we appreciate you. I know that your ASU team won. Can't wait to play ASU. We'll put it to you like that. But for John Schuster, I am Mike Luke. We've been, again, you've been listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast. Everybody out there, thanks a ton. I'll be back with you tomorrow, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much for tuning in. Schu, talk to you soon as well.
Aloha.